One of the most powerful AI companies on Earth woke up to a headline that sounded impossible. The CEO was out, the board was in control, and the entire future of the company suddenly looked like it could split in half. In less than a week, it turned into a corporate thriller. Executives scrambling, employees choosing sides, allies making calls behind the scenes, and the internet watching every move like it was a live playoff game. But here's what makes this story different from normal tech drama. This wasn't just about money or ego. This was a fight over what OpenAI is supposed to be, who gets to steer it, and how fast the most powerful technology on the planet should be released. And the reason people still argue about it is because the official explanation felt vague. So everyone started asking the same question. What was the real trigger that made the board pull the plug? If you want the full documentary breakdown with a clean timeline, confirmed facts versus reported claims, and the business lesson behind it all, like the video, subscribe, and comment Civil War. So I know to keep pushing these chapters, because before we can talk about the secret reason, we have to reconstruct the exact chain of events minute by minute, starting with the single decision that detonated everything. And what happened next will make you wonder how the company didn't collapse overnight. It starts on Friday, November 17th, 2023. OpenAI drops a short statement that hits like a grenade. Sam Altman is out as CEO, removed from the board. And the board says it lost confidence after concluding he was not consistently candid in communications. Within hours, the company names CTO Mira Murati as interim CEO, and the leadership cracks widen fast. Greg Brockman steps down as chairman, and the internet realizes this isn't a normal CEO transition. It's a power struggle. By Saturday, the story isn't calming down. It's escalating. Reports swirl about negotiations, investors calling, and internal panic, because OpenAI isn't just any startup. It's sitting in the middle of the AI boom. Then Sunday night, the board makes another sharp turn. It replaces Murati with former Twitch CEO Emmett Shear as interim CEO, and Shear says he'll look into what happened, basically admitting the situation is unstable. That same night, Microsoft steps into the frame with a move that changes the temperature of the whole crisis. Satya Nadella announces Microsoft will hire Altman and Brockman to lead a new AI team inside Microsoft. Translation: OpenAI might lose its CEO and its people in one sweep. By Monday, the civil war becomes visible in public. Employees circulate a letter threatening to leave unless the board resigns and Altman returns, turning this from boardroom drama into an internal revolt that the market can't ignore. And then, by Wednesday, November 26th, OpenAI announces an agreement in principle for Altman to return as CEO with a new initial board. Brett Taylor as chair, Larry Summers, and Adam D'Angelo, effectively ending the coup attempt in less than a week. But here's the part that makes people's heads spin. If hundreds of employees, major investors, and Microsoft could push a reversal that fast, how did a small board have the power to fire him in the first place? Because OpenAI isn't built like a normal company. And that structure is the real reason this story could explode the way it did. OpenAI isn't built like a normal Silicon Valley company, and that's the key to why the board could make a move that looked impossible from the outside. The public thinks CEO answers to investors, but OpenAI's top-level governing body is a non-profit board, OpenAI, Inc., and that board has the authority to hire and fire the CEO of the organization. OpenAI even stated in its own announcement that OpenAI, Inc., a 501c3, is the overall governing body for OpenAI's activities. That structure matters because it changes the incentives. In a typical startup, the board's core job is to protect shareholder value. In OpenAI's case, the nonprofit board's job is to protect the mission, at least in theory, even if that mission conflicts with speed, hype, or profit. And when your board is mission first, the question becomes, what happens if the board believes the CEO is moving too fast, shaping the company too aggressively, or not sharing information in a way they consider acceptable? They can act fast, without needing permission from investors in the same way a normal company would. That's why this felt like a civil war instead of a regular firing. The people with legal control weren't necessarily the people with the money, the partnerships, or the day-to-day operational reality. Journalists pointed out how unusual this setup is and how it enabled the board to act unilaterally compared with standard venture-backed companies. Now add one more ingredient that makes this story volatile. OpenAI grew into a hybrid system with a nonprofit parent and a commercial arm that needs huge capital to compete, which means the tension between mission control and business pressure isn't a side plot. It's the main plot. OpenAI's own structure pages and later governance updates describe the nonprofit foundation's board governance role and its special rights over the broader organization. So when the board said it lost confidence because Altman wasn't consistently candid, that wasn't just a vague phrase, it was a mission board invoking its core power. But here's the twist that makes Chapter 4 unavoidable. If the board's official reason was not consistently candid, what does that actually mean in real-world terms? What would a CEO have to do, or not do, for a board to hit the nuclear button at the exact moment OpenAI was winning? The board's phrase sounded polite, but it was basically a nuclear accusation in corporate language. Not consistently candid means the directors believed they couldn't trust the information they were getting from the CEO, so they couldn't do their job. OpenAI's own announcement said the board concluded Altman wasn't consistently candid in his communications with them, which hindered its ability to exercise its responsibilities, and that they no longer had confidence in his ability to lead. Notice what they didn't say. They didn't claim fraud. They didn't list specific incidents. And they didn't give the public a concrete reason you can point to and say, that's the moment. That vagueness is why the Internet instantly filled the empty space with theories. Because when the official story is one sentence, people assume the real story is being hidden. But months later, reporting around the independent review made something important clearer. The core issue was described as a breakdown in trust with the prior board, not a finding of financial wrongdoing or a single dramatic safety dispute that forced the firing. So if it wasn't one scandal, what does a trust breakdown actually look like inside an AI lab moving at full speed? It looks like disagreements over who gets informed, what gets approved, how decisions get communicated, and how much control the board is supposed to have when the company is shipping world-changing products, negotiating huge partnerships, and becoming a global symbol overnight. And that's where the real story shifts from a firing to a pressure cooker. Because the week of the ouster didn't start with a random betrayal. It started with OpenAI becoming too powerful, too fast, under a structure that was never designed for normal startup politics. And in the next chapter, we're going inside that pressure cooker to see what forces were building up before the board made its move. OpenAI didn't implode in 5 days because of one random argument. It imploded because the company was sitting inside a pressure cooker that had been building for months. On one side, you had a nonprofit board whose job was to protect the mission, even if that meant slowing down. On the other, you had a CEO operating in the real world of competition, partnerships, and product momentum, where slowing down can mean losing the entire AI race. That tension is baked into OpenAI's structure, and the moment ChatGPT took off, the tension stopped being theoretical and became daily conflict. The company was scaling at world changes overnight speed, and when that happens, communication stops being a nice-to-have and becomes the only thing keeping governance from cracking. The board's public language, not consistently candid and hindered its ability to exercise its responsibilities, wasn't just a PR line. It signals a governance relationship that had already broken down. Now, layer in the atmosphere at the time. OpenAI was at the center of a historic tech moment, meaning every decision carried massive weight. What to release, when to release, how to message safety, how to handle partnerships, and who gets to approve what. Reuters reporting at the time described a schism over the future of AI development, including concerns from some leaders about pushing software too quickly into users' hands and the safety implications of moving fast. At the same time, multiple outlets reported that OpenAI told employees the firing was not about malfeasance or financial issues, but about a breakdown in communications with the board. Again, pointing back to trust and governance, not a single scandal. And when OpenAI later summarized the independent review, it described Altman's ouster as a consequence of a breakdown in the relationship and loss of trust between him and the prior board, meaning the pressure cooker wasn't one explosive moment, it was accumulating strain until someone pulled the pin. But loss of trust is still a blurry phrase unless you translate it into real-world boardroom behavior. What was the board asking for that it felt it wasn't getting? What was leadership doing that the board felt boxed out of? And what specific flashpoints turned tension into a decision to fire the CEO with almost no warning? Because once you line up the reports and the timelines, you start seeing a small set of competing explanations, and one of them explains why the board acted so suddenly even though it knew the company might revolt. Now we get to the part everyone calls the secret reason, and the only honest way to handle it is to separate what's confirmed from what was reported, because in this story, the gap between those two is where the drama lives. What's confirmed is the board's public claim. They said they lost confidence because Altman wasn't consistently candid and that it hindered their ability to do their job. What's reported is that there wasn't one single movie villain moment. There were multiple tensions piling up. Reuters reported that OpenAI's fight reflected a deeper schism over how the most powerful AI should be developed and released, including concerns that the company was pushing tools out too quickly and that safety could be compromised by speed and commercialization pressure. Reuters also reported that around the time of the ouster, the board received a letter from researchers warning about a significant AI advance and raising concerns about commercializing advances before understanding consequences. Reuters noted it was one factor among a longer list of grievances, and they couldn't review the letter directly. Then months later, OpenAI's own summary of the independent review didn't validate a single explosive allegation. It framed the removal as a breakdown in the relationship and loss of trust with the prior board, not a specific wrongdoing announcement. Put that together, And the secret reason starts looking less like one hidden scandal and more like a governance collapse. A mission. First board felt it didn't have visibility or control. Leadership felt urgency to move at the speed of the market. And trust snapped under the weight of secrecy, competition, and fear of falling behind. And here's the cliffhanger. Even if the board believed it was protecting the mission, it still made a decision that immediately triggered open revolt. So in Chapter 7, we have to answer the real question. How did a board with legal power lose the war in just a few days? The board technically had the legal power, but it didn't have the one thing that decides whether a tech company lives or dies: the people who build the product. Within days, the crisis stopped being a quiet boardroom decision and turned into an employee rebellion. More than 700 staff signed a letter warning they could resign unless the board stepped down and brought Altman back, and the letter even had signatures that made the situation look like it was collapsing from the inside. That kind of revolt is existential, because if the engineers leave, the company is basically just a name and a Slack workspace. Then Microsoft poured gasoline on the fire. Satya Nadella publicly announced Altman and Brockman would lead a new advanced AI research team at Microsoft, and reports described Microsoft offering a landing spot for any OpenAI staff who wanted to follow. So now OpenAI wasn't just losing a CEO, it was staring at a mass talent migration to its most important partner. At the same time, the outside pressure went nuclear. Investors and partners were watching a company at the center of the AI boom wobble in real time, and the board's original statement was so vague that it made the uncertainty worse instead of better. And that's the key. Once a governance move creates chaos, the market punishes the chaos. Employees punish the chaos, and partners punish the chaos. So the board's power becomes theoretical. In under a week, the board realized it had won the vote, but was losing the organization. With employees ready to walk and Microsoft ready to absorb the leadership, the only path that avoided an immediate collapse was a deal. Altman returns, and the board gets reshaped with a new initial slate. But here's the cliffhanger that sets up Chapter 8. Even after the reversal, the biggest question didn't disappear. It got sharper. Because if a board can fire the CEO on Friday and the company can force a reversal by Wednesday, what changes were made behind the scenes to make sure this never happens again? And what did the independent review actually conclude about who was telling the truth? After the chaos week ended, OpenAI still had a problem. The public didn't know what really happened. Employees didn't trust the stability of leadership, and the world had just watched a company building frontier AI nearly tear itself in half. So, OpenAI's board formed a special committee and brought in outside counsel WilmerHale to do what tech companies do when the story won't die: run a formal review, document everything, and publish a version of the truth that can hold up under pressure. OpenAI later said WilmerHale conducted dozens of interviews, reviewed more than 30,000 documents, and evaluated corporate actions, and that the board expressed full confidence in Sam Altman and Greg Brockman's ongoing leadership after the review. Then came the most important line in the entire report summary. WilmerHale found the firing did not arise out of concerns regarding product safety or security, the pace of development, OpenAI's finances, or its statements to investors, customers, or business partners, and instead was a consequence of a breakdown in the relationship and loss of trust between Altman and the prior board. The review also said the prior board moved on an abridged timeline without advance notice to key stakeholders and without a full inquiry or giving Altman the chance to address concerns, basically confirming that the decision may have been within their authority, but the execution was combustible. So OpenAI didn't just move on. It rebuilt the guardrails. Altman rejoined the board. 3 new board members were added: Sue Desmond-Hellman, Nicole Seligman, Fiji Simo, and OpenAI announced governance upgrades like new governance guidelines, a strengthened conflict of interest policy, a whistleblower hotline, and additional board committees, including a mission and strategy committee. But here's the part that sets up the final chapter. Even after new rules and new board seats, OpenAI's structure is still unusual. And later, reporting shows governance questions didn't magically disappear as the company kept scaling. So in Chapter 9, the real question isn't who won the Civil War. It's this: did OpenAI actually fix the underlying conflict, or did it just pause it long enough for the next power struggle to arrive? Here's the real ending to the Civil War. Nobody got everything they wanted, but the company learned, publicly, what its real weak point was. The independent review OpenAI commissioned, run by WilmerHale, concluded the firing didn't come from concerns about product safety or security, the pace of development, finances, or statements to investors, Chuck's customers, Chuck partners, and instead came from a breakdown in the relationship and loss of trust between Sam Altman and the prior board. That's a brutal takeaway because it means the company wasn't mainly arguing about a single technical issue. It was collapsing over governance and communication while operating at the speed of a global platform. And that's why this story matters beyond OpenAI. Frontier AI companies aren't just building software, they're building power, and power breaks systems that weren't designed to handle it. When the mission is benefit humanity, the structure has to withstand pressure from money, competition, partnerships, public attention, and internal fear of falling behind. And OpenAI's structure made it possible for a small board to hit the nuclear button, and for the workforce and partners to force an emergency reversal days later. The lesson is simple but uncomfortable. In high-stakes companies, the secret reason is often not a single scandal. It's that trust becomes the most valuable resource, and once it cracks, everyone starts acting like they're in survival mode. If you want the next documentary, like the video, subscribe, and comment which sequel you want. What not consistently candid really means in boardroom terms, how OpenAI's nonprofit control actually works, or why AI companies are uniquely vulnerable to governance blowups. Because the next story isn't just about what happened in 2023. It's about what happens the next time a company building world-changing AI hits a trust-breaking point again.